Candidly, gentlemen, there's not much that Congress can do to make President Xi stop his country from producing the precursor chemicals. I've met with President Xi personally in Beijing. I don't think it did much good. And candidly, there's not much the United States Congress can do to make President Lopez Obrador in Mexico stop the cartels. He knows what's going on. There are two things that we can do. First, we, meaning Congress, we can secure the border. It's an open, bleeding wound. And it is wide open. And it is wide open by design. I've seen it. Most of the members of this committee have. That's not what I want to talk about. The other thing that Congress can do is crack down on the dealers, not the addicts, Mr. DeFord, the dealers. Now, Mr. Urban, see this pencil?
Yes, sir.
This pencil tip, the amount of fentanyl just in a pencil tip, as represented by a pencil tip, will kill you dead. Dead as fried chicken, Mr. DeFord. I hope that's Southern enough for you. You see this? 40 grams?
Yes, sir.
This will kill every man, woman, and child in Culpeper, Virginia. Not far from here. If you have this much fentanyl, you're a dealer. This is 400 grams. This will kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, you're a dealer. You're not holding this much fentanyl. You're not dealing. Now, 40 grams. This will get you, if you get caught, a minimum of 5 years. Okay? 400 grams, if you get caught with this much, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, and many more before you step on it, this will get you 10 years minimum. There's just one problem. We punish other drugs less severely than we do the most powerful drug, fentanyl. I mean, just look at it. 40 grams, 5 years. 400 grams for fentanyl, 10 years. Methamphetamines, 5 grams will get you 5 years. 50 grams will get you 10 years. Much less severely than fentanyl. We do the same thing for PCP. We do the same thing for crack cocaine. What you allow, gentlemen, is what will continue. Now, I support the Fentanyl Eradication Act that we've talked about today, but I also support something else. I support another bill, the Fairness in Fentanyl Sentencing Act. And it would lower the 5-year mandatory minimum threshold from 40 grams of fentanyl to 2 grams. And it would lower the 10-year mandatory minimum for 400 grams to 20 grams. And we ought to pass it too. What you allow is what will continue. I'm going to yield back, Chairman Brown, my 14 seconds to make up for my past transgressions.
It doesn't, but that's fine. Senator Warner of Virginia.
I want to thank our esteemed chairman and ranking member, Senator Tester, for accommodating my schedule. Thank you all for being here, especially to my friend Michael Heck. He's a very talented, able guy. Michael's head of the business community in New Orleans and the surrounding area. I can say some things that he can't say. We have two problems in Louisiana in terms of flooding. We have hurricane flooding and we have non-hurricane flooding. I want to talk about the non-hurricane flooding first. When New Orleans gets 2 inches of rain in a short period of time, it floods. Why? Because New Orleans is below sea level, and it's in a bowl. It's in a bowl. That's why our founders in the city built first in the French Quarter, because it's the highest area. We have what's called the Sewage and Water Board, which has pumps when it rains a lot to pump the water out. We've had that for years and years and years and years. The taxpayers pay for it. And for years and years and years and years, it has been a model of inefficiency. In fact, it has been a cesspool of political patronage and corruption. Now, Michael can't say that because in the business community doesn't want to say that because they're worried about retribution from the politicians. But it's the truth. Look at the headlines from our TV stations. Payroll fraud in a secret sex room. Troubling allegations at New Orleans Sewage and Water Board. Former New Orleans Sewage and Water Board employee sentenced for theft scheme. New Orleans Sewage Water Department raided by FBI. Ex-Sewage and Water Board official has to pay back $100,000 he stole. Next headline, we knew the Sewage and Water Board was dysfunctional. Now we know it's corrupt. The people of New Orleans deserve better. And what we need to do is one of two things. The politicians have had their shot. They missed. We need to either turn the Sewage and Water Board over to the state of Louisiana and let somebody else run it, or we need to privatize it. Because the Sewage and Water Board's plan right now, when it floods, when half of the pumps are broken, you know what their plan is? I kid you not. Move to higher ground. Where? Now, the second problem is hurricane flooding, and this is the National Flood Insurance Program. We need a national flood insurance program that looks like somebody designed it on purpose, because the one we have right now is not. The old one wasn't great, but at least it sort of worked. A few years ago, the FEMA decided they were going to reinvent it. And they hired an outside group, a consultant, paid them bucket loads of money called Milliman. And Milliman came up with a new algorithm. And this algorithm is so good, they say they can look in the future and look at each individual home and predict whether it'll flood or not, 20 years from now. They made all kind of wild allegations. Any day now, I expect FEMA to say, this algorithm is so great it'll grow hair, or it'll cure ED. And I say, man, I need to see this algorithm. Can I see it? No. If we show it to you, I'll have to kill you. And I'm in charge of their budget. They lied. They lied. They have the credibility of Jussie Smollett and Michael Avenatti put together. They lied. They said 1 million people of the 5 million people will see their rates go down. I haven't talked to a single person that's seen their rates go down. This is just an excuse to raise premiums, and they don't care. The whole purpose of the National Flood Insurance Program is to provide a product that people can afford. In my state, here's what the premiums have done. They said, a lot of you people, Kennedy, they'll see a decreases. Terrebonne County, we call our parishes, our counties parishes, 305% increase. Another parish, 321%. Plaquemines Parish, 540%. FEMA lied. And they're not going to do any better. Now, the best part of Senator Menendez's bill, it's a good bill. I'm on it. He and Senator Castile, we've all worked hard. but it's going to cap the rate increases at 9%. Right now, FEMA can raise the premiums 18% every single year, and they're going to keep doing it because they don't care. They lied to the American people and my people, and they ought to hide their heads in the bag along with all the politicians that have allowed the Sewage and Water Board to steal money for all these years. Thank you.
Statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the last 3 years, the American people have been ravaged by inflation. That inflation, like all inflation, is man-made. That man's name is Joe Biden. Since President Biden has been president, the average electricity bill in America, the average, has gone up 27%. Louisiana gasoline, I know every state is different, but Louisiana gasoline under President Biden is up 59%. Eggs are up 79%. Bread, 30%. Coffee, 30%. Milk, 15% under President Biden. Ice cream, 26%. Housing in general is up 19% because of President Biden's inflation. Clothing, 12%. Used cars and trucks, 20%. New cars, 19%. Mortgage rates are up a staggering 160%. If you add it all up under President Biden, inflation the last 3 years has been 20% in Louisiana and 19.2% nationwide. Louisiana is not a wealthy state. The median household income in my state for a family of four was between $55,000 and $60,000 a year. Mom, dad, 2 children. That's not a lot of money when you think about it. A working family, mom and dad both work. They both have to drive to work, so they have car payments. They have a house note. They have to buy food. Sometimes they have to pay tuition for their children. As a result of President Biden's inflation, the average family in Louisiana is paying today an extra $900 a month. That's almost $11,000 a year. Now, I know that each of you makes more than $55,000 or $60,000 a year, but imagine that for a moment that you make $60,000 a year, and you're the provider for your family. And all of a sudden, you've got to find an extra $11,000 a year. Wow. You know, you max out your credit cards, you go through your savings, you've spent all your STEMI checks long ago. Inflation is gutting the American people like a fish. It has become a cancer on the American dream. And quite frankly, that's why President Biden is polling right up there with hemorrhoids. I mean, the American people can't sit down and explain to you the difference between disinflation and deflation. The American people, they don't read Aristotle every day. They just get up every day and go to work and obey the law and pay their taxes and try to do the right thing by their children and maybe save a little money for retirement. But they're really being hurt. Now, why? Because President Biden has spent money like it was pond water. It started with the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. He has spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, money that we had to borrow. Now, unless you were playing Frisbee in the quad during Econ 101, you know, whether you're Milton Friedman or John Maynard Keynes, that when you spend this kind of money, you're going to have inflation. Dr. Jason Furman, who was a chief economic advisor to President Obama, tried to tell President Biden, said, if you do this, you're going to have inflation. Former Harvard President Larry Summers said the same thing. You don't have to be Euclid to figure this out. We're all entitled to our opinion. That's the beauty of America. You know, you're not free if you can't say what you think, and you're not free if you can't express yourself. I do not believe that there is some nationwide conspiracy between and among small business people, medium-sized business people, large business people who have conspired to raise these prices. I don't think most of these businesses wanted to have to raise their prices. They did have to, though, because their costs have gone up dramatically. And you don't have to look any further for the reason than 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I think the evidence bears that out. I don't blame President Biden. I don't blame him for trying to get reelected. I don't, okay? When I run again, I'm going to try to get reelected. I don't blame him for trying to blame inflation on somebody else. I get that. But the truth of the matter is he's blamed inflation on everything but murder hornets. And we've still got time left. He may blame them on murder hornets. But the truth of the matter, it's his own economic policies. And his own economists tried to tell him this, and he wouldn't listen. And the American people are paying the consequences. They're going to have a say, though, this November. And everyone should vote your conscience. If dead people can vote, you can too. Vote for the candidate of your choice. But I can tell you this, the only place you're going to find lower prices is in the voting booth. It's not going to change. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. So now,
you know, you're not free if you can't say what you think, and you're not free if you can't express yourself. I do not believe that there is some nationwide conspiracy between and among small business people, medium-sized business people, large business people who have conspired to raise these prices. I don't think most of these businesses wanted to have to raise their prices. They did have to, though, because their costs have gone up dramatically. And you don't have to look any further for the reason than 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I think the evidence bears that out. I don't blame President Biden. I don't blame him for trying to get reelected. I don't, okay? When I run again, I'm going to try to get reelected. I don't blame him for trying to blame inflation on somebody else. I get that. But the truth of the matter is he's blamed inflation on everything but murder hornets. And we've still got time left. He may blame them on murder hornets. But the truth of the matter, It's his own economic policies. And his own economists tried to tell him this, and he wouldn't listen. And the American people are paying the consequences. They're going to have a say, though, this November. And everyone should vote your conscience. If dead people can vote, you can too. Vote for the candidate of your choice. But I can tell you this, the only place you're going to find lower prices is in the voting booth. It's not going to change. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you need to move to the vote on this? Senator Kennedy, would you mind having the vote first, or do you want to have your statement made?
I want to have my statement.
Okay. And then I would really ask everyone if we could do it.
I'll be-
I'm
I'll
happy
be-
to
I'll
have a
be
conversation
brief, Madam
after.
Chair.
Okay.
I think you and our vice chair have done a fine job. I know how hard it is to put together a budget. I think we're all aware these are pretend votes today. Everybody's all of my Democratic colleagues are going to vote for the 302B allocations, and all the Republicans are going to vote no, which means, of course, we don't have an agreement. I think it's smart to move forward, but my question is this, Madam Chair, to you and our esteemed Vice Chair. When are we going to get serious about the 302B allocations? When are we going to work it out?
I will just tell you that, yes, you all know we finished our last year's allocations in March. We immediately began discussions, serious discussions on this. We are very close to where we need to be, and we'll continue those discussions. We know that that needs to be accomplished.
And I would add, Senator Kennedy, that the motion on the 302B allocations recognizes that there can be further adjustments. So it's not over till it's over.
This
Well,
is the
I just
beginning.
want to get us started. And it
Right.
seems to me that you can't put together a budget until you know how much you have to spend. And I appreciate the spirit of cooperation. I think we ought to move forward, but we all know these are pretend votes. This is play acting until we can agree on 302Bs.
Under the committee rules, we are going to move forward right now to accomplish that. We will continue to work together. We want to get the process started.
My work here is done.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Murray, I have enjoyed working with you. I want to read some names. Lindsay Garcia, Anna Newton, Katie Williams, Rachel Littleton, Doug Clapp, Aaron Goldner, Laura Powell, Maria Calderon, and Amanda Wema Bradley. Those are the members of our staff on both sides of the aisle, and they worked very hard, and I want to thank them. They're kind of unsung heroes, so I don't know, maybe now they'll be sung heroes. This is not a bad bill. Could be better. We're spending more money on defense. In particular, our plutonium pit production, our nation's weapon systems, the nuclear armed sea-launched cruise missile. My biggest disappointment, as you know, and I don't want to overstate it, the world's not going to spin off its axis, but we've got more work to do. As you know, a big portion of the energy and water development bill is defense. And so how we define defense matters. We also have a problem in our country with nuclear contamination, many sites. And that's an environmental concern. Technically, it's defense, but to me, it's more environmental. And we obviously have to address those. Senator Murray and I disagree over whether that is a defense expenditure or a non-defense expenditure. I think it's non-defense. I think when we call it defense, this is my point of view, and only my point of view, when we call it defense, we give the impression to our constituents and taxpayers that we're spending money on defense when we're really not. But as we all know, this bill has a long way to go. I applaud our efforts here. I support them. I think I voted for all the bills. I think we all recognize to a large extent this is play acting. At some point, we're going to have to reach agreement on 302B allocations. I know we've taken a vote. It was a purely partisan vote. I'd like to see us sit down and negotiate that. And we also have got to convince Senator Schumer, my friend Senator Schumer, to bring the bills to the floor. And we've got to talk to our House members. So we've got a long way to go. Final point. We are starting to discuss extending the cuts in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And that's a discussion we need to have. To me, the way we ought to start is taking a look at what worked and what didn't work. And if it worked, we ought to do it again. We ought to order a dozen. If it didn't work, we shouldn't do it. But we're not going to be able to do that in a vacuum. We all know we have to spend more money on defense. We just do. I don't want to have to learn Mandarin at my age. We've got to spend more money on defense. We cannot ignore the fact, I don't want to get into whose fault it is, that we're running deficits. And those deficits become debt. And if we keep going at the rate we're going to run out of digits. So sooner or later, we're going to have to take a look at our budget. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm a part of it. But we got to stop creating exceptions and emergencies that aren't really emergencies and really sit down and have a frank discussion how we're going to balance all these competing interests. And maybe the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act issue will be the propellant that we need. And that's just one person's point of view, but I bet Tester agrees with me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
For his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. About 90% of my personal and political philosophy is don't hurt anyone else unless you have to defend yourself. Don't take other people's stuff. And leave me alone. I believe in free enterprise. I believe in markets. I believe in the ingenuity and the persistence of the American people, of all people, humanity. Non-compete clauses are sort of like Senate bills. There's some good ones, and there are some bad ones. Non-compete clauses, by their definition, are a restriction, operate as a restriction on both the employer and the employee. So from one perspective, there are restrictions on free enterprise. That doesn't mean that they're inappropriate in all cases. When it's necessary to protect business information, when it is necessary to protect trade secrets, when those agreements are negotiated by two parties of reasonably equal bargaining strength, there can be a place for non-compete agreements. They can also be abused. I don't think it's appropriate for example, a fast food restaurateur. I don't know if this example even exists, but I've heard some people allege it. Shame on them if it's not true. But if it is true, I don't think a fast food restaurateur should ask entry-level employees to sign a non-compete agreement. Then what's the point other than to restrict free enterprise? That makes no sense to me. I think it's also very important for us and for the courts to take a look at the bargaining strengths, relative bargaining strength of the parties. I don't believe in contracts of adhesion. I think that people ought to, all things being equal, ought to be able to address these issues with the same amount of leverage. Now, we live in the real world. I know that balance doesn't always exist, but it's something that we have to take a look at. Most state law, of which I'm aware, requires that non-compete agreements be reasonable. And courts, I think, at both the state, to some extent at the federal level, but generally it's a state issue, take a look at the length of the non-compete agreement. They look at the bargaining strength of the parties. They look at the terms, obviously. They look at what behavior is being restrained. Why is it necessary to restrain that behavior? What are the interests of the employee? What are the interests of the employer? And if they're reasonable and there's a legitimate purpose, I think in most cases they've, let me say this, in many cases they've been upheld. I'm going to stay as long as I can today. I'd like to hear your testimony. I'd like to ask you questions. We've got a lot going on. I think a vote has already been called, and I'm going to have to go down and vote. But what my friend Senator Warren said in her opening statement, notwithstanding about Republicans, that's kind of this Republican's point of view about non-compete agreements. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. And now I'd like to introduce.
Small businesses is like being against golden retrievers. I mean, so I thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions related to that in terms of how our small businesses, rural and otherwise, might be struggling. Secretary Menke, you're an expert in agriculture, obviously. Some people in Washington have argued, not particularly persuasively in my opinion, but this is America, they have the right to their opinion. Some people in Washington have argued that food inflation has been caused by price gouging by our grocery stores. Do you believe that?
That would not be my argument, no. Inflation has impacted everything, and you started talking about disasters. I mean, when we found farms who had their properties wiped off the face of the earth by a tornado, and they had just maybe spent a couple of years, only in the last couple of years, looked at their different insurance coverage, we found that the price of everything has gone up dramatically. Well, so I would not assign blame to the grocery stores. Okay. Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you will know the answer or not, but when you go to your local grocery store and go buy a banquet frozen fried chicken TV dinner, what are the margins like for the grocery store? Are they making like 100% profit? Or is it more like 2 or 3% because the competition is so great among grocery stores? I don't know exactly, but I'm guessing it's closer to the latter. Okay, all right. I'll give you one person's opinion. This inflation that we have experienced was made in Washington. And I don't hate anybody. I look for grace wherever I can find it, but part of our job is to call it like we see it. And I think the Biden-Harris administration has been an inflation machine. Never seen anything like it. Worst bout of inflation we've had in 40 years. Now, we're doing better. The inflation's down, but all that means is that the rates are not rising as quickly as they were. The prices are not rising as quickly as we were. So we're having disinflation. But that doesn't help with the real problem. The real problem is these high prices are permanent. Just because they're not going up as quickly as they were, people are still paying the high prices. That's the difference between disinflation and deflation, as you know. How has this job-killing inflation impacted rural small businesses? Well, maybe we start down here.
Senator, it's a mess in Iowa. What I'm familiar with, we don't have any workers that are working anymore. I used to have a job opening and get 50 applications for a position in a bank. I advertised for 2 months and I got 3 applications. One did not respond when I requested an interview. The other 2 ladies are over 60 years old and willing to work.
I'll stop you because I want to hear.
Yep,
from
go
everybody.
ahead. But it's a problem with workers. We don't find the workers, and the cost of living is
Mr. Luce, I wanted to give everybody a chance here.
Yeah,
Thank you for that, sir.
I think in my world, remote work and shortage of labor really kind of blew up our labor costs. All of a sudden, somebody doing web development in New Hampshire could work for a San Francisco wage from home and pay for cost of living in New Hampshire. So that was a big adjustment for us during COVID and after. I think we've compensated with just having a great place to work that people want to work at, and it seems like some of that's leveled off, but it was pretty difficult to find people, and that's our biggest expense is our people.
Okay, Ms. Lang?
From what I've talked to, the people I have talked to that have small businesses, everything costs so much. Like every single thing you buy, a ream of paper, pens, it's also, sometimes it's almost impossible. And a lot of small businesses have closed. I've talked to a lot of people that own restaurants, and the food costs are so high that they can barely make it. So I'm not the inflation expert, but that's what I've seen.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Ernst?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thanks so much. I'm going to talk a little bit more about rules,